and we're watching the chat. So almost half of all of our greenhouse gas emissions relate to buildings. And some of these buildings belong to individuals like ourselves. We can solve most of our climate problems by not burning any more coal, oil, and gas, and instead using electricity generated from renewable sources to power everything we do. In talking about what is possible to do in our homes, I hope that people who are thinking about remodeling or replacing a furnace or adding a room or even building a home might gain some ideas that will inspire your planning. Or if you don't have such plans already, maybe you will consider them. Thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, this is a lot more doable now than it used to be. I started doing these home energy presentations long before the IRA was passed, and I know that there are other workshops this week that are specifically on it. But just in case you don't make it to any of those, at the end of the presentation, I'll point out a couple of resources about the IRA that you might find helpful. I'll begin in downtown Jeffersonville, across the Ohio River from Louisville, Kentucky, in the 100-year-old house where our family used to live, and where most of our children grew up. It was a lovely home, but as you can imagine, when we moved in, it was not energy efficient. By the time my spouse, Don, and I started thinking seriously about this, most of our 6 kids had gone off to college. But in the years that followed, every one of them came back to live with us for a time, sometimes with their families. And we had some other young adults with us as well. Maintaining that big house with everyone coming and going meant that we had to work hard to conserve energy. We began by keeping spreadsheets of our electricity and gas use to know better what we were spending and why. Then we had an energy audit, including a blower door test to help us find and plug the leaks in walls, doors, and windows. The first recommendation coming from the energy audit was to better insulate the attic and to blow cellulose insulation into all the empty gaps of the exterior walls. This wasn't as involved as I would have thought. It was a couple days' work, and it cost about $3,400, and we recouped some of that with a federal tax credit. There is even more money available for that now. It was the single largest change to our quality of life. We were more comfortable without a leaky home, and it saved a lot of money in utility bills. After heating and cooling, water heaters cost the most energy in homes. Ours was old and inefficient and threatening to break, so we had a tankless water heater installed. It saved a lot of money because it only ran when we needed the hot water. We were able to get a federal tax credit that paid the difference between a traditional water heater and that one. This one ran on gas, and I will show you a very different one that we have now. There are also electric tankless water heaters that can be installed right where you use them for instant hot water. The IRA offers up to $2,000 to change your water heater to a more efficient one, and some utilities offer rebates as well. Back when we were doing it, we got $500 to help us out for that one. We went down all the list of tax credits and rebates that we could find to cut our costs. In 2008, when Hurricane Ike caused a windstorm that blew all the way up to the Louisville area, we lost 7 trees. That was when we decided to remove the gas piping from our fireplace and install a Vermont Hastings wood stove with a catalytic converter. It could heat about 1/3 of the house on its own, and as Don likes to say, it warmed him twice, once when he was chopping the wood and once when burning it. We never once sacrificed a tree for it. It was always fallen trees or trees our neighbors decided to remove. We used to listen for the sound of a chainsaw in the neighborhood and run out in our pickup truck to ask if they would dump their scraps into our truck bed. Don calls it living off the fat of the land. We started making one change per month in our old house. One month we put up a clothesline, another month we installed CFL light bulbs, and then later LEDs. We weather stripped doors and windows. When we replaced appliances, we bought Energy Star or better. We bought a Nest thermostat that automatically set back the power at night and when we weren't at home. We kept some room vents closed and supplemented with ceiling fans in summer. The idea was to heat and cool people, not rooms. And this presentation isn't about transportation, but we did buy a Prius and used our feet and bicycles much more often. And for what we couldn't eliminate, we bought energy offsets and green energy when possible. I had been vegetarian for many years by then, and Don is and was mostly vegetarian. And when he does buy meat, he looks for locally sourced grass-fed meat. This chart of gas and energy use from 2005 to 2017 shows our journey in the old house. The gas is in red, the electricity is in blue, and you can see that with some aberrations, we were able to cut our use significantly over the years. Annual use of both gas and electricity was cut by 2/3, not 50% as the IPCC recommended, but 67% without that much effort in a large 100-year-old house. We could have done some other things. We kept our HVAC system serviced, but didn't replace it. That would have been a next step. We could have leaned on our adult children more often to wear seasonal clothing rather than changing the thermostat. But we couldn't install solar panels because we had too many trees, which of course is not a bad thing either. We did pretty well, but 4 years ago we moved. Since 2005, we had owned acreage in Henryville, 20 miles north of Louisville. It had a pond, a dock, some fields, and some woods, but no buildings except an old truck bed. In 2017, we started planning a house there. We started researching how to get all the way to net zero energy, that is, using no more energy on average than we can produce renewably. We came across this company in Cookeville, Washington. The owner, Ted Clifton, has been a home builder and designer for 45 years and specializes in net zero homes. He has a long list of certifications and awards, including being a 7-time National Energy Value Housing Award winner and 3-time National Green Building Award winner. He designed Seattle's first true net zero energy home and works frequently with the Department of Energy and receiving their awards for housing innovation every year. So we knew we would be getting the best if we asked him to design for us. On Ted's homepage is a video outlining 12 steps to net zero. What stands out right away, watching that video and even looking at this list, is first, that not many of these are easy to retrofit into an existing home. Second, the house operates as a whole system, engineered for efficiency. Third, solar panels are the last thing on the list, not the first. I'll show you what he designed for us and how all these factors played out in our house. His ready-made home plans range from 500 square feet to 3,400. We really liked this house on Ted's website, but it was 2,700 square feet. I thought that was too big, so I asked him to shrink it to 2,300. Meanwhile, we interviewed home builders until we found the right one. Nick Ronio in Lanesville, Indiana, is one of Indiana's foremost builders of efficiency homes. When Nick began talking with Ted about the plan, he realized we'd be taking him and his crew to a new level. He called it going to school with us paying the tuition. He was glad to do it, and so were we. The first time Nick visited our home site and saw how hilly it was, he recommended adding a walkout basement to our 2-story plan. Basements, he said, are far cheaper per square foot than the other floors, so why not? Especially since we'd need a safe room for tornadoes, like the one that destroyed much of our town 10 years ago. So Ted added a basement. All in all, the house ended up about the same size as our old house, but much better laid out. That big a house wasn't what I had in mind, but we recognized that the ongoing disadvantage of a large house is heating and cooling. And if it worked as it should, that would not be an issue. And by that time, our immediate family had already doubled in size, and now it's grown to 13 adults and 7 grandchildren. Almost everyone is in these pictures, though a couple are missing. 2 days after we moved in, our kids started coming to stay with us, and that was what we hoped for. And we wanted to start a grandma camp for our urban grandkids, so we were glad to get going right away. When our Miami son, Ian, was here the following Christmas of 2019, he loved the place and joked that when the apocalypse came, they'd be at our doorstep. Little did any of us know that the apocalypse was scheduled for 2020. 2 months after his remark, when the schools Ian and his wife led went virtual, they and their daughter and unborn child drove up there to Indiana and stayed the first 5 months of the pandemic with us. A couple years later, our oldest daughter and her family came and stayed with us 8 months. And now our next daughter is planning to come while she's in transition. In short, when you have 6 kids, even when they grow up, the chances are pretty good you're going to want the space. Back to the home building. We first broke ground on a chilly morning in January 2018, and we moved in 18 months later at the end of July 2019. And here's the house. I'm not going to walk through it, you'll just have to come visit us for that. But I do want to outline how Ted's 12 essential steps to net zero played out. First and third, the building orientation and window placement. That obviously involves planning, but no additional cost. This is the southwest side, and to the right, you can see the southeast side. These are where most of our windows are. We put porches around these to keep out much of the hot summer sun while inviting in the winter sun when it's low on the horizon. The design makes the porches integral to the house and expands our indoor-outdoor space. The northeast and northwest sides have fewer and smaller windows and don't need the porch. You'll notice that we have a breezeway connecting the house to a carport. That carport is at a 45-degree angle from the house, with the driveway side facing due north, and I'll show you why in a few minutes. In terms of simple design, stacking the house to pack 3 floors under 1 roof means that the footprint is not large. We put everything essential for daily life on the main floor, the middle one, and that meant a smaller living room, bedroom, and primary bathroom, along with the laundry room, kitchen, and screen porch. We put Don's study upstairs with the guest bedroom and my study in the basement next to a den with a futon for more guests. If later we don't want to climb a lot of stairs, we won't have to. Thermal mass is not something most homeowners think about, but the more mass there is absorbing heat in the daytime and radiating it overnight, the more the temperature inside remains stable. You can do that with stone or brick walls or tile floors. In our house, it's done with 4-inch concrete under the oak floors in the basement and the main floor. This serves another purpose that I'll talk about in a moment. And unusually, the builders put the insulation outside the 10-inch thick basement walls rather than inside to include their mass inside the building envelope. This leads to the next factor, a tight envelope. Our designer, Ted, generally uses Septs, structural insulated panels, that are factory built and cut to specification. They're made of foam in the middle with OSB or plywood on either side. They can form the roof as well as the walls. So the house insulation is built right into the framing and there are very few seams. But Nick, our builder, wanted to stick with traditional framing with spray foam insulation, which he had the workers to do. But he used a 2x6 exterior wall and roof studs instead of the conventional 2x4s, with insulation between all of them and Huber zip panels on the exterior. This also meant having extra deep windowsills, which is great for plants. Tight walls are no good without tight windows. We got triple pane casement windows and doors that are beautiful and airy and lock like a submarine. They came in packing crates from Canada, so Don, ever the recycler, used all the crates to build shelving for our barn. When a house is very tight, ventilation is crucial. We installed a regular range hood, but added an exhaust fan on a variable speed controller with a timer. The fan is mounted on the outside of the house and is wired to a fan in the attic that draws air into the bedrooms and living areas whenever we turn on the kitchen fan. A timer allows us also to run it in the pre-dawn hours of summer to bring cool air into the house. Now for the heating and cooling system. Along with hot water, air heating and cooling use by far the most energy, even with great insulation and thermal mass. We have a closed-loop ground source system, what people conventionally but erroneously call geothermal. There are various configurations, but ours is vertical, as you can see on the upper left. Water is pumped through the pipes in the ground beside the house. No matter what temperature the water is when it leaves the house, it re-enters at the constant ground temperature of 50 degrees, which the heat pump can boost by 20 degrees upon re-entry, rather than starting with the extremely variable air temperature as low as 0 degrees or as high as 100, where we live.
How deep did you have to dig for the geothermal?
We weren't there the day that they did it, so we don't even know how deep it is. And I was assuming that they would do something horizontal or in the pond, but we're not very rocky and we have a clay ground, so they figured that the best option was to go deep.
Okay.
We didn't have to make that decision, and I'm glad about that. Yes,
You're using a well instead of getting city water?
No, we do get, it's not city water, but we do have water provided. We just have the pipes for the geothermal ground source heat pump. So with a heat pump, you don't need natural gas at all. Our house is all electric. This highly efficient variable speed heat pump provides our hot water, which is stored in this 85-gallon space capsule looking smart storage tank. I was surprised that we wouldn't have a tankless water heater, but this thing is said to save 80% on hot water energy use, which I don't think you can do with even the most efficient tankless heater. And our rural electric co-op gave us a $1,500 rebate for installing the ground source heat pump. And we got a federal tax credit on top of that. The house's original design didn't call for any central ducting. Instead, efficient mini splits would provide the cooling. Unfortunately, and this is one of the limitations in our area of the country, the HVAC company wouldn't work with us unless we agreed to install a whole house air conditioning system. The downside was we ended up with a lot of ductwork sending air to rooms that we didn't always need to cool. The upside was that everything connected to the ground source heat pump earned the 30% tax credit. So this heat pump also provides air conditioning. We almost never use the air heat from it though, because we also have this other heat pump. It uses the warmed water from the ground source loop to warm another series of water pipes that are embedded in the concrete floors in the basement and the main floor. People think of in-floor radiant as being toasty to the touch, but it really isn't, since our body temperature is much higher than we want our floors and rooms to be. But it's not cold either, for instance, standing on the bathroom tile. It's highly efficient because there are no fans and the heat simply rises from the floor into the rooms. Ours has 3 zones: the finished basement rooms and the primary bedroom area, both of which we can keep rather cool, and the living area, which we keep a bit warmer. The second floor doesn't have or need heat since the warm air rises to it from the open living area. We liked our old stove so much that we installed a fireplace that is basically a built-in wood stove. And here you can see some of my brother Steve's artistry. He made all the cabinets in the house. The stove has an intake vent from outside and usually radiates enough warmth to keep the floor heat from turning on when it's burning. We designed the cabinets on either side to hold kindling and firewood and to convert in the warm months to bookshelves. And we supplement the cooling with 11 ceiling fans. These don't cool rooms, they do no good at all unless there are people for them to gently blow on. But they lower the felt temperature on your skin quite a bit. The large windows also allow us to cool with cross breezes, especially mornings and nights. And the wraparound and screened porches let us spend a lot of time outside, even when we're just drinking coffee or eating dinner or doing desk work. The appliances are extremely efficient. We have an induction cooktop and a convection wall oven. The cooktop not only heats faster than traditional electric cooktops and without heating up the kitchen, but it's also faster and more responsive than gas. It's 90% efficient as opposed to 50 or 55% for gas and electric. The oven is actually two smaller ovens that fit into the footprint of a single one, so we only heat the space that we need. These are also very quick to heat up and they hold their heat well. I'm pretending to show this picture to point out the appliances, but also to say this is the world's most amazing kitchen, designed by my brother. I wish we were here to talk about all of its efficiencies beyond energy. You can see the cooktop in the corner. The oven and fridge are in the tall cabinet on the left beyond the baking counter. The dishwasher, where one of the blue arrows is pointing, is Energy Star and amazingly quiet. Right next to it is a microwave drawer made by Sharp. You push a button and it rolls out. Microwaves in general are very efficient. The fridge and the clothes washer are, of course, Energy Star as well. The clothes dryer is the single appliance within the house that draws the most electricity, but it doesn't run long because the washer spins so well. If we had waited a couple more years, we could have gotten one of these new heat pump clothes dryers that are even more efficient. They're ventless and they run off of a 110 plug, so they can be put anywhere and can easily replace a gas dryer. Even so, we did install a clothesline and we still use it. When the sun is shining, and even when it's not, the windows are so sunny that we don't turn on many lights in the daytime. But for night, every light in the house is LED, which means we use very little energy on them and rarely change a light bulb. Last but not least, on the essential steps to energy efficiency, we have a rooftop solar system from Solar Energy Solutions in Louisville. That's what that south-facing roof of the carport is for. The carport was built to the solar installer specifications in direction, size, and roof pitch. And because the carport and the breezeway were built to hold the panels, they were eligible for the 30% federal tax credit along with the rest of the solar system. This is why we didn't put in a garage, because it wouldn't have been eligible. We have 26 Trina 300-watt panels in full sun. All but 2 of them are at 812 pitch, about 33 degrees, which is right for our latitude. Each panel has a SolarEdge microinverter, maximizing its efficiency. And they are connected to a SolarEdge inverter, which turns the DC power into AC, so our house can use it, and a Tesla Powerwall battery, which stores 13.5 kilowatt hours of the energy generated in the daytime, so we can use it overnight. We can also send excess power out to the grid, and we do, but since we're on a rural electric co-op that doesn't offer net metering, we are charged 3 times as much as we are credited for power we produce. So we like to send out as little as possible and store what we can in the battery. In fact, after watching how our electric storage and output worked for almost 2 years, we decided to install a second battery. These batteries also serve as a backup power source the way a generator would. In the past 4 years, the grid has gone down many times, occasionally for several hours, but it has made no difference to us. The appliance that uses the most power of all is this Clipper Creek 240-volt charger in the carport for my Chevy Bolt. So I charge on sunny days when the energy would otherwise be going back to the grid. And you can see inside that door, Don's electric assist bike, which is also powered by the solar panels. And he commutes to work on it. We also have a posse of electric yard and garden equipment, most of them made by Greenworks. Lawnmower, electric wheelbarrow, stream trimmer, backpack sprayer, leaf blower, small tiller, and a couple of chainsaws, all rechargeable from the solar panels. A Tesla app monitors our power generation in use. The screenshot on the left is from a mostly clear day in January. Since the previous day was cloudy, we started on an empty battery, so the whitish blue shows that the grid supplied our electricity until sunrise around 8. The spiking lines show the in-floor radiant heat kicking on and off through the cold night. The yellow shows the solar power generation, which on that sunny but short day was 34 kilowatt hours. The blue shows our home's use. The large blue tower in the middle is my car charging. The green shows storage in the battery below the baseline and use of the battery above it. You can see that the battery helped with the car and took over when the sun went down. That evening, the heat stayed off because the sun had warmed the house. Much more satisfying is a day like the November day you see in the middle, though in spring and summer we surpass it by quite a lot. That day, even though the overnight temperature was 35, we had a lot of sun. We generated 41 kilowatt hours and the house used less than 14. We filled up the battery, sent most of the power to the grid, which earned us a whopping 96 cents, and also encouragement of knowing that our neighbors were using renewable energy. Some days we get as much as 51 kilowatt hours from the sun. Last, the image on the right shows why going off the grid would be difficult if you didn't want to rough it. It was just 2 days before the sunny day on the left, but it was quite cloudy and cool, and we only generated a little solar energy, not even enough for heating on a day like that. Here's our first full calendar year of power generated in blue and power used in red. You see the power that we generate peaks during the longest days in June and July and falls quite a bit in the winter. The power we use peaks in winter and summer with heating and cooling. Most months, the blue line stays above the red one, which is what we want, but not in the winter. If we had net metering, or if we simply wanted to generate as much on average as we used all year without regard to cost, we could do without the batteries. But with the batteries, we save money, not having to buy back our own power for 3 times as much as every night. And I can charge my car with 100% solar, which matters to me living 20 miles from town. Speaking of electric cars, here is a New York Times article about the financial aspects of driving EVs. I know the graph is probably too small to read, but what it shows is the comparative cost over the life of various cars. Gas-powered cars in gray at the top, diesel cars in green, hybrids and plug-in hybrids in pink, and electric cars in yellow. The price of EVs, as we all know, is falling, and maintenance cost is low because there's no engine and very few moving parts. And charging is cheaper than gas, especially home charging. And they have awesome pickups, so they're fun to drive. And if you are Mark Aiken and not inclined to what he calls the dorkmobile like I am, you can enjoy an EV Mustang. Because my 5-year-old Bolt charges rather slowly compared to cars that are coming out now, it means we get plenty of rest and relaxation at the charging stations. This summer, we took it on a 3-week tour of Quebec and the maritime provinces of Canada. We always take beach chairs with us and sit under whatever shade we can find with a picnic lunch. All in all, in the year 2020, when we were intensively cooking and working from home and had 3 extra people for nearly half the year, with the AC cranked up through the hot summer for our pregnant daughter-in-law, with all that, we used only 519 more kilowatt hours than we generated, which is about like keeping one incandescent light bulb on. Without the car, we'd have generated more than 2,000 kilowatt hours more than we used. In other words, getting to fully renewable energy in the house took not the 30 years the authorities say we needed to use to get there, but 1 year with careful planning. This year, 2023, we are net positive so far and on track to be net zero, including the car. In terms of building, we didn't have as much capacity as we would have liked to choose the sourcing of all the materials that went into our home. But we did what we could to try to minimize what went into the builder's dumpster. We grabbed pallets, scrap trim and lumber, boxes, extra wires, stray nails, everything that we could either reuse or recycle to keep it from the waste stream. We chose limestone from here in Indiana and crab orchard sandstone for the patio from Tennessee, and used natural products as much as possible. There are better and better ways coming to make sure that to choose materials that have a measurably lower life cycle carbon footprint and are non-toxic. It's something to be informed about and talk with your builder about early on. NREL, NREL, with the US government, is working on these issues, and the Living Futures Institute's living building lists for materials to use and avoid are also helpful. And I put a link to that on the resource page. In terms of cost, in our old house, recycled from the early 20th century, we knew how much we paid for improvements that brought our power down by 2/3. We more than recouped what we invested. And since our third daughter and her family are living there now, they continue to reap those benefits. Since the efficiencies were all rolled into the overall cost of the new house, we don't have an exact figure for these. And although we couldn't have lived here without building a house, we also have to ask what the environmental footprint was, not only of materials, but of having the trucks rolling in every day to build. But that would have happened building an inefficient house. In fact, we regularly hear about other homes being built nearby that cost much more, not for efficiency, but for gargantuan rooms and bathroom spas and pricey trim and other things with no monetary payback. Just as a ballpark, according to several experts, the extra cash layout for energy efficient building is around 10%, which is recouped over time, and continues to benefit in lower utility costs over the home's life, which, barring the tornado of the century, will be much longer than we will live. Energy efficiency is not just for people with deep pockets. Habitat for Humanity is building and retrofitting some net zero and net positive energy homes for low-income people. Here's one built almost 20 years ago in Colorado. It doesn't even include some of the technologies available today, but it still produces 25% more than it uses. The upfront costs are somewhat higher for insulation, better appliances, and solar panels, but the savings over the years of ownership more than make up for it. Here's a more recent Habitat house in North Carolina that won a Department of Housing Innovation Award. It is DOE Zero Energy Ready certified, Energy Star certified, and Indoor Air Plus certified. It's also, it's all electric with a heat pump, water heater, and ductless mini splits. Even without solar, its utility cost is $300 per year cheaper than the same size standard house. At our home, we're also growing a lot of our own food, and we expect to grow more when we retire. Here's just a glance at the gardens that we're working on around the house. Lots of vegetables, and herbs, and fruits, a greenhouse, also a root cellar. We have birds, wildlife cover, native trees, and it all keeps us very entertained. As I mentioned before, we built our house before the Inflation Reduction Act came along. So whatever you do will actually be more cost effective. If you haven't gotten to know the IRA from other workshops this week, I recommend going to this website, Rewiring America, and downloading their guide. And I put a link to it in my resource page too. It gives basic information about what is available. Several recent studies show the extent to which indoor natural gas is linked to asthma and other health problems. The IRA offers help for installing electric heat pumps for heating and air conditioning and hot water. Both of these not only save money in fuel and maintenance costs, but also improve indoor air. There are also tax credits for other devices to eliminate gas when our current appliances wear out. Heat pump clothes dryers, electric stoves, and induction cooktops. The IRA also helps with modernizing electrical panels and wiring and with weatherizing. The way the IRA is structured, the less money we have, the more help we will get. The booklet is keyed to a calculator online for previewing how much IRA funding your household can receive. It's graduated by income level, but generously so. For instance, a family of 2 in Kansas with a household income of $100,000 can receive more than $22,000 in tax credits, and also, after that, save more than $1,300 every year in utility costs. For a couple whose income is $50,000, the upfront discounts can cover up to 100% of the costs. All of these tax credits are already available, and whereas before the tax credits could not be used by congregations and nonprofits because they had no taxes to reduce, now they too can claim them in the form of direct pay and receive the benefit. These point of purchase discounts are supposed to become available soon if they aren't already in your state. Many utilities and local governments will add more incentives on top of these, so it's good to check for them. Point of purchase discounts come right off the purchase price, so nonprofits and churches can take advantage of them too. The last thing I want to underscore before we open up for Q&A is this little note that I found on the Rewiring America website this week. There is a lot of urgency to reduce our energy use as quickly as we can. Very few of us are old enough to remember the huge collective work that went into changing our consumer demands to support the World War II effort, but we've no doubt heard about it. We haven't had that kind of national urgency before in most of our lifetimes. And even though the situation today is even more dire, we aren't necessarily hearing it from our politicians and news outlets. But the need is there. So I hope that every single one of us will go home to carefully consider and begin by making a plan for what we will do over the next year or 3 years to make ourselves zero energy ready. And I'll say once again in concluding, and I'll leave it up for just a moment, that QR code in the corner is will take you to the resource page on my website to get some of the websites that I've been talking about today. So that's what I have to say, and I'm wondering if we can have some questions and discussion. And I think that there are several people tuning in from across the country. So if you do have a question and want to put it in the chat box, please do. And I am going to stop this share, and hopefully we can all see each other, or see each other's names at least. And I'm just gonna work, see if I can start the video there. How's that?
Well, we see you now.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we should
There's Sarah.
maybe we should go to a different view on this one. I don't know how to run it.
Sarah, do you have a question?
I better
There was a question came in and, yeah.
Okay, question in the chat. Your home looks to be worth about $2 million. No, it's not. How much did you invest in your home? It was about $1 million that we spent on it. And that was a lot because we, not so much from the energy efficiency thing, but we Just, we wanted a particular kind of trim and all of that. Any other questions?
Yeah, one here.
Oh, yes, Corey.
You talked about your resource page and you flashed something on the screen, and maybe I got it with my camera, but can you tell us again how to find your resource page or your website?
Yeah,
It will also be what you put in the QR code, all of that, Mindy put in the conference resource page too.
oh, okay, so,
There's a link to that. They'll email it to you again.
okay,
Okay,
yeah. So it'll go to a website, it's inhabiting-eden.org. And then there's some backslash. And you can either, look online, or there's also a downloadable resource page. And if you can't find it any other way, just email me.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Your home is beautiful and amazingly designed, but it uses energy like any home does. I didn't see a lot of,
It doesn't use energy like any home does, but it does use energy. Yeah.
it uses energy, not the same.
Comma, as in, yeah, okay,
Right.
gotcha.
The question I have is on conservation. What about surrounding trees and bushes that can help a house? I didn't see a lot around your house.
Yeah, we built the house on a hill that had been a field and doesn't have trees around it. In fact, I think we took out like 3 very small trees to put the driveway in, and that was it. Oh, and I had never lived in a house that was not shaded before, and so I was a little leery of that. But the insulation has, fully proven itself. It does feel very, very cool inside. And then we do have about half of our property is wooded, so we're surrounded by trees on all sides, but they're not shading the house.
here's a comment.
It says, here in Albuquerque, I've had no tax credits, though I have a Nissan Leaf and 18 solar panels, double glazed windows, and a level 2 charger in my garage. We live on $4,000 per month and have no taxes to pay, so no tax credits to claim. I think, and I'm not an expert at all on the tax credits in the IRA, but you might check that, because I think that even without taxes to pay, the IRA will provide funding. So do check that carefully. It's very different from the tax credits that we've had up until this point.
It's also probably good to check with Interfaith Power like New Mexico, the local state chapter, because
Yeah.
states have different ways of doing some things.
Interfaith Power, also NREL, NREL. If you Google that, they provide a long list of all the federal and state, and sometimes local, tax rebates and credits that are available.
Is that in your resource list?
That one is not. Any other questions or comments?
What about snow?
Snow and solar panels.
Mhm.
Yeah, the snow does block the solar panels when it's there. It's been rare that it's not melted off. Where we live in southern Indiana, it's rare that it hasn't melted off by midday. But yeah.
The panels themselves are warm, so it will move the snow off pretty quick.
Yeah, and they're not flat, of course. They are at an angle, so that helps.
Yeah, a couple.
Next comment, if we have an electric dryer, is that as good as a heat pump dryer? No, it's not. You probably want to keep it until close to the end of its life. Especially if it's fairly new. But when you go to replace it, a heat pump dryer would be wonderful and does get a good tax credit. And it'll be, far more efficient than an electric dryer would be. On your induction cooktop, what kind of pots and pans? It works by magnetism. So any pot or pan that you can have a magnet to and it attracts it is going to work on the cooktop. And I don't understand this very well, but the way an induction cooktop works is through this magnetic field, the burner itself, or what we think of as a burner, the surface doesn't get hot, but it turns the pan itself into the heater. So the pan gets hot and warms the food inside of it. In fact, the first time we saw one was at somebody else's house, and they demonstrated by putting a paper towel on top of the stove, and then putting a pot on top of the paper towel and boiling water without igniting the paper towel. It was pretty amazing.
Use a lot of cast iron.
Yeah, we love cast iron. We don't like Teflon, but we had a lot of cast irons. You can use cast iron, enamel, and stainless steel all work. Aluminum doesn't.
We bought a simple one burner cooktop.
Mhm.
Carolyn took on a challenge of using that alone for cooking during Lent. We were trying to lower our carbon for Lent. And you can get one of those for as cheap. We got it from Amazon for less than $80.
Yeah, you can get the one burner ones. In fact, that's what we did first in our old house before we installed the induction cooktop at our new house. And one of the beauties of that is you can take that thing, it'll plug in anywhere you've got a plug, so you can take it with you outside and wherever you want to go. And it is a good way to explore induction cooking without investing in a whole stove or a whole cooktop.
And it uses far less energy too.
Yeah.
Corey's got one.
Oh, Corey, yes.
If we wanted to put in a heat pump for something, does that mean we have to drill a hole in the wall and,
No,
how does it work?
no, there are air source heat pumps as well as geothermal or ground source heat pumps. So it's recommended by the US government, the IRA folks right now, to the next time you replace either a water heater or air heating and cooling, to not go with a regular old-fashioned equipment, but yes, go with the heat pump. And depending on your location and situation, they'll be able to work out what kind of heat pump is going to work best for you.
Well, if it's pumping the temperature of air you don't want somewhere else and bringing in and making the other temperature you do want, it seems to me you've got to be using a hole to take you out, pump some of that air out.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably, if there is a hole, it's probably something like this. I'm not sure how big the holes are for the mini splits, the room air conditioner and heater units, but I think they're something like small. Yeah. And
the technology has improved for colder weather for those as well. So.
Yeah, they're by far, I mean, even several years ago, they were by far the most efficient way of heating and cooling air and water, but they've come a long way even since then. So, the main point of them is they're not burning anything, either by gas or by electricity. They're just heat exchangers, in the same way that our refrigerators are heat exchangers.
And it uses electricity then.
Yeah, it does use electricity, but it doesn't burn like electric furnaces.
Yeah.
They heat it up. What is a filament up? I'm getting way beyond my depth here.
Consumer Reports had a very good in-depth article comparing the brands, reliability of heat pumps, just in April of this year, so you have,
Can you all hear Bruce talking? Let me know. Yes, okay, go ahead. You were saying,
I was just saying, in April of this year, Consumer Reports had an in-depth evaluation of the brands and reliability of the different heat pumps that are out there. I think they're impartial, not promoting any product or anything. But
yeah. Consumer Reports is excellent in that way. Also, if you can make your way through the Energy Star pages, they have a lot of information. Yes, Don, do you have a question about your own house?
A comment. Having followed you around on this for a while, with the old house, with church building, with the new house.
Can you all hear Don?
One of my big takeaways is that, everybody goes straight to solar panels, straight to high-tech equipment, but the whole thing begins with a caulking gun and insulation.
Absolutely.
That, we've encountered several good solar installers, and it all begins with pumping up the efficiency of the house before you begin adding all the high-tech stuff. It's so very basic, and it starts with the cheap stuff.
Absolutely.
And you can get a long way on that without solar panels, without replacing your HVAC system. Just light bulbs, caulking, and insulation can get you a long, long way. Yeah,
and you can start by saving money and then pumping the money that you saved, if you can, back into further efficiency. So it's really highly useful to make a plan, and begin with the smaller stuff and begin with a energy audit, if possible. Sometimes the utilities will provide those, or sometimes you can get an engineer from outside to come and do an energy audit, and then follow their recommendations, going from the least to the greatest, and from the most efficient to the less energy, less economically recouping technologies. And I was going to say something else about that. Yeah, make a plan. Oh, and with appliances, you know how sometimes appliances will break down suddenly, and if you want to wait until your appliance, until you need a replacement, it's good to have in mind what you're going to go for, so that when the emergency happens, you can be ready for it. And there was a new comment in the chat.
Yeah.
Do you use equipment meters on each appliance? Oh, to meter the electricity used from it? We don't. We do have a little gadget called a kilowatt.
Kilowatt, right.
Yeah, you plug it into the wall and then plug the appliance into the kilowatt, and it can tell you how much it's drawing. And that's a useful tool. And those are very easy to buy.
We put one of those in our public library for our neighbors to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And we've had some real surprises, like when we had adult kids working from home. We found some old computer monitors that were just killing us on their electric use.
Yeah.
Gas lights, so.
Yeah, large external monitors, TVs. People don't even realize how much power is being drawn from those. And so we had our adult kids turn off their monitors instead of putting them to sleep or leaving them on, and that made a big difference. All right, thank you all so much. I think we've run to the end of our hour. And really appreciate your participation. And as I said before, if you have further questions, you probably can figure out how to reach me. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So are you stopping the recording of that?
Oh, yeah. I don't know how to use this one.
I'm
Oh, there we go.